Welcome to my Monday musings and welcome to the new week. Alright, so today I just want to go through a message I got from Magister Morpheus. It's quite a long message, there's a lot to unpack, but I thought it would be good to actually go through this step by step and discuss it as I do so, because it can help some other people have similar questions and have had similar experiences. So with Magister Morpheus's permission, I am going to do that. So let's get started. Hello, I'm new to this. I was wondering if anybody else had this experience. So I did my first summoning. I've done it because 4 angels said through a tarot card reader that they have been waiting to work with me. Numerous tarot card readers said this to me when doing my reading. Anyway, so after months of studying and the left-hand path, I did my first summoning. I summoned Lucifer to ask permission. I fell into a trance-like state which never happened before, and long story short, he said yes. So I summoned Astaroth. I summoned her in a bad state of mind. I hit rock bottom and I needed guidance. Everywhere I read, I was warned never to summon in a bad state of mind. Well, I did it anyway. With tears, I was scared. Growing up in a Christian family, Dad being a pastor and all, I expected to basically get dragged down to hell. I took my chance. I was very afraid. I was crying. I did the summoning, and instantly, after about 5 minutes, I felt a strong presence in my room. It was real. It was not my imagination. I am not crazy. I am a logical, sound person. I do not do drugs. I do not have mental issues. I am not clinically depressed or any of that, but this was real. Instead of expecting an evil entity, Astaroth, or I should say Inanna, aka Astaroth, instantly came close to me and I felt as if she completely put her arms around me. That's the only way I can explain it. The most unbelievable love. She communicated with me. I did not hear words or voices, but the way she communicated with me was through feelings. This is the only way I can explain it. She would give me a feeling and I would instantly know what her sentence was to me that she was trying to tell me. Okay, let's stop there and just discuss all of that. So, first of all, getting this kind of information through tarot readers, I'm not going to say it's you shouldn't do it or it's not possible, but just be wary of some people who are doing this type of thing where they bring this message from angels or spirits of any kind for you. Because there are a lot of people out there who they're scammers. The fact that Magister Morpheus got a variety of readings from different readers, and they all say the same thing, kind of a different story. But I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be wary when you do it, and you get these messages through other people. It's always better to get the messages by yourself, obviously, but for some people that can be quite difficult, especially for somebody who's starting out. So going to a reader and getting these messages can be very, very helpful. But again, just be wary, just be on your guard, and even if you do get a message from a reader, test it, question it, and try and get answers yourself also before just throwing yourself in there and jumping feet first into the fray type of thing. Then the actual summoning went into a trance-like state. That's absolutely perfectly normal. And when we talk about trance, you do get different levels of trance. You can go into a light trance and speak with the spirits. For somebody who's beginning, it's usually better if you go into a deeper trance because you kind of separate yourself from your own consciousness a little bit more. So when you are speaking to the spirit and you bring the messages back to your consciousness, there's less doubt of whether you actually made it all up or not. So going into a deeper trance can be helpful. Getting into a deeper trance can be difficult as well. It just takes practice. You just got to practice do the practices, go through all of that, and grow, exercise. Exercise those muscles. And then entering this type of communication whilst in a bad state of mind, we are usually told to not do magic when we are depressed or anxious, or we are going through some kind of mental instability. Now, this is a bit of a sticky point here. We can do magic when we're just feeling down and we need something to help us, boost our mood. That's a bit different to being in a situation where you are going through a mental illness which is not being treated. So there's a bit of a difference there. We're also told not to do magic when we're angry. There are cases where you can do magic when you're angry, and you can actually use that anger in the magic itself. So it depends on what you're able to do with the things that you have. But when it comes to somebody who is going through a mental breakdown or some kind of mental illness, it's better to get that treated before you go into magic. And there's also this thing of you cannot do magic if you're on medication. Bullshit. There are lots and lots of people who do magic while they're taking antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, and they do it successfully. So that's a load of rubbish. If you are going through any kind of mental illness, make sure you're getting treated for it before you go into something which could actually make it snowball and make things worse. So remember that. But as I said, it's when you're in a bad frame of mind or a bad state of mind, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't do the magic. When I say magic, we can differentiate between doing spell work, which you would need to have one pointed focus for, and therefore you need to be in a good state of mind because you have to focus specifically on the work you're doing. But if you are going into a meditation or some kind of astral work where you are going to be communicating with a spirit, and you need to ask that spirit for help with your bad state of mind, that's a very different thing also. So, there's no hard and fast rules. It's guidance, it's suggestions. If you're feeling down, you're feeling bad, you're feeling angry, you're feeling ill, maybe you've got flu or something like that, there's a times to just sit back and just wonder, should I be doing this? And if you can't find any reason not to do it, then go ahead and do it, type of thing. And then the actual experience itself, Inanna embracing her or him, and feeling unbelievable love, it's perfectly natural, and crying. I mean, when we have those experiences, it's awesome, and it's also something we say is it's awful, because we become filled or full of awe. And that experience can be overpowering. It can be absolutely amazing, and you do find that you burst out in tears because it's just it's unbelievable. It's an experience that you can't explain. It can only be experienced, but that's perfectly normal also. And then the communication itself. So communication through feelings. Yeah. I've spoken about this quite a bit regarding the psychic senses. So when we start working with magic, when we start doing witchcraft or any of these spiritual practices where we are developing our psychic senses, the words sight and seeing, usually with a capital S, they come up. And what we tend to often do is we associate that with our physical eyes, because we think that we only see with our physical eyes, but we see with our skin, we see with everything on a physical level. If you've ever searched for information regarding how to sleep better at night, you'll probably find mention of remove all lights from the room, and that includes little blinking red lights from phones and alarm clocks and all of these little things. It doesn't matter how small the light is, it's still a light. And when the sun goes down, there's a certain thing that happens with melatonin and such in the body, and when the sun comes up, the reverse happens, and that's because our skin sees. So we don't just see with our eyes, we see with the whole body, and this is especially apparent when we talk about psychic senses. When we talk about the sight and we talk about seeing, we're seeing with our entire being. It's not just with our psychic eyes. Remember that, and then when you're communicating with a spirit, it doesn't mean that you hear with your ears, or your psychic ears, or even your physical ears, or even mentally. Telepathic communication where you hear a voice inside your head can happen to some people, doesn't happen to everybody. Sometimes that communication is through feelings, it can be through thoughts, it can be through impressions, it can be through images, it can be through smells, it can be through tastes, it can be any manner of sense that we have. We get that communication with our entire being, so we get the communication with all of our senses. But in some people, 1 or 2, maybe 3 of the senses may be a bit more enhanced than others, and therefore you're going to get that communication through those specific senses, because they are more enhanced, they are more apparent, and that's how we get that communication. So communication through feelings, absolutely perfectly fine. That's very much how I get communication from the spirits as well. And you sort of interpret the feeling into words, into something we can comprehend and understand, and then therefore develop the conversation further. Let's just have a look. Anyway, she was basically showing me sympathy, or maybe passion or love, or a motherly caring type of heavenly love, as if she understood every single pain there have ever been through my life. Sorry, it's actually something I just want to come back to, is the aspect of the fear. Fear of doing this type of work because we come from a Christian background. That's perfectly natural, because we have been programmed, we've been ingrained with these ideas and thoughts that anything beyond the Christian God is therefore evil. So when we start doing any kind of magic, we still have that programming in us, which kind of kicks in, and then all of a sudden we experience something that's completely opposite to what we were taught, and it kind of creates questions, it creates doubts of what we were taught and what we understood before. But that programming is still there, so it's going to be a long time before that programming gets out. I still get it myself, because even if you have worked through all of that programming and you've deprogrammed yourself, we still live in that society. We still live in a Western society, and we're reminded every day through media, through people we talk to, colleagues, bosses, parents. It's still there, and that is the overculture. So we're still reminded of it on a daily basis. So don't beat yourself up about that or anything. It's perfectly normal. Okay, so where was I? As if she understood every single pain there have ever been through in my life. My tears went from being tears of being scared to tears of joy because I couldn't believe the love I felt from this entity. Long story short, I summoned her throughout the week a couple more times to speak with her and feel her amazing love again. And every time I summoned her, I felt her heavenly love. It was almost as if I was almost high. I know it sounds crazy, but it was such a strong feeling. I was almost in a euphoric state of love that I felt from this entity. Okay, so yeah, you had an amazing, fantastic experience. And something I actually do want to mention also, the fact that you did it throughout the week and you still had the same experience throughout the week. A lot of people don't get that. And it can kind of be a bit depressing actually, because it's a bit like beginner's luck. So if you sit down, you decide you're going to do a meditation practice, and you sit down and you do your first meditation practice, and it goes amazingly. It was like you had this experience and it was fantastic, and now you understand why people do this meditation thing. And then you sit down the next day and you do it and nothing happens, and you kind of can't figure out why. It's usually, a lot of people refer to it as beginner's luck, but what happens is you sit down, you expect the same thing to happen, so you try to force it to happen, and it doesn't because you're trying to force it. So the fact that you had that experience every single day during the week is quite profound actually. But if anybody else here is wondering why they didn't get the same experience the next day, probably why you were expecting to get the same experience that you did the first time, and unfortunately it doesn't quite work that way. But it's important to carry on, to continue doing the work, because over time you then stop forcing it, you stop pushing it, and then you start to have those experiences again. And we go through cycles. We go through cycles through our entire life. It could be a daily cycle, a weekly cycle, a monthly cycle, an annual cycle, but we go through these cycles. So sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's more difficult, but it's important just to keep doing the practice all the time, on a regular basis. Okay, she told me that she does not like to be called Astaroth. She prefers to be called Inanna. Please understand, I have never heard of Inanna before. When I googled what I was told by her, it was just, well, mind-blowing, and you can imagine. Eventually, long story short, she told me that I need to evolve, meditate more, in order for her to work with me, because her energies would have some type of negative effect after a while as a beginner. Okay. Very important again. So Astaroth is a name that comes out of Goetia. A lot of people associate Astaroth of the Goetia with Astarte, Inanna, Ishtar. And that's perfectly fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. My own personal experience with Astaroth was that, and I asked this specifically, was that Astaroth is not Astarte. Definitively. They are not. They are of the same archetype, but they are not the same being. So it's a bit like having a split off into twins. They are from the same archetype, but they are not entirely the same being. So Astaroth and Astarte are similar, but they're not the same. This is my own personal experience with Astaroth and Astarte. So when it comes to Astarte, Ishtar and Inanna, they are very much the same entity, the same goddess, because that was a development in one general area of the world throughout history, from the Sumerian to the Mesopotamian, Babylonian, Akkadian, etc., etc., etc. And it was the same goddess that was just renamed through different cultures, through different areas, but it all all took place in the same general area. But as I said, some people associate Astaroth with Astarte. Myself, I don't, and there's nothing wrong with either. It's personal experience. So it's very interesting that she said that she is Inanna, and you'd never heard of Inanna before. It may have been something you picked up growing up. You may have heard it in some history class and you just didn't remember it, so it was in the back of your mind. But again, you were told by a spirit that they don't like being called this, they prefer being called that. It's a very, very defining experience. One of those experiences that you come out of and you say, I definitely didn't make that up. That was something profound. All right. And also to evolve yourself, to meditate more. That would be to raise your frequency, raise your vibration, so you're in the same frequency as the spirit itself. And that makes perfect sense. Because her energies would have some type of negative effect after a while as a beginner. Yes, because if you're vibrating at a lower vibration and then the spirit is, then that effect can cause some damage. So through meditation you can do banishing rites as well, which raise your frequency also. You can do offerings, so you can set up a small altar for Inanna and do offerings each morning when you do your meditation. Just replace the water, light some incense, light a candle, that type of thing. And do the meditation and the practice and evolve yourself, build yourself up, raise your frequency in honor of Inanna. That can help. She referred me to Prince Orobas. He has solved all my problems, I must confess. Orobas is just fantastic. I love Orobas. She is extremely loyal to me and has given me everything I have ever asked for within a week. You must understand, I was in a mess. The first month, he texted me to see if I was loyal. I'm not sure what that means, texted, and whether that's in reference to Prince Orobas. Sorry, maybe you can just relay that in the comments. I passed his tests. The second month, suddenly someone gave me their car as a donation and found myself with $60,000 in my bank. Damn, we could all do with that. I can go in details if you like. Anyway, I asked Astaroth, aka Inanna, to show me a clear sign that she is real, that this isn't just my imagination. This is before I worked with Prince Orobas. So here it is. She told me tomorrow she will make herself known to me. So the next day during an afternoon, I was in my room just cleaning. Suddenly I felt her. I did not summon her, but I felt her in my room. She told me to look outside in the sky towards the left, and to my surprise there was a black triangle shaped UFO just hovering 300 feet in the sky as if it was parked. It was standing still. I have never seen a UFO in my life until then. Now I constantly see them. Almost every night they come, usually in white orbs, sometimes in metallic shape, just randomly, but every time they light by me, I get a feeling to look up in the sky as if they are telling me to look up. I know it sounds crazy. Anyway, for about a week, that UFO kept coming by at the same time in the afternoon by my house, would stay for a few hours. I guess I forgot to mention that black triangle UFO also had a basketball-sized black ball that was constantly spinning around it. I don't know what that was all about, but every time that you were forward, sorry, this next sentence a bit confusing. I don't know what that was all about, but every time that you were forward, leave that bomb, probably autocorrect or something, would stay, and it would circle my house for the whole night. She also had a spirit, or maybe it was her, I don't know, following me that same week. Okay, hang on, let's just stop there and then we'll go on to the rest. So, the whole UFO experience, this is where things get a bit tricky. You've got a lot of people out there who talk about the gods being aliens from a different planet. There's some of the older authors, Eric von Däniken, for instance, goes into it a lot. Zachariah, now I've forgotten the name, he wrote the Earth Chronicles, a whole series of books. There's a lot of people out there who say that the gods were aliens. They came from space and they taught developed humankind. And I don't discount it at all. I think there is definitely some truth in it. The difficulty is that it tends to start being taken into a direction of complete fantasy. It may be somebody who is channeling a message from these higher beings, and then somebody else takes that channeling and they run with it, and they create this whole fantasy around it. So it's a bit difficult to say whether it is true or not. However, when it comes to the Sumerian gods and the Anunnaki, there's a lot of people who are talking about, and have been talking about it for a long time, who have been talking about the Anunnaki being from another planet. From this Zachariah person mentions from the 12th planet Nibiru. It's difficult to try and weed out the facts from the fantasy here. So when you do start researching this, just take things with a grain of salt and do your research properly, because it can get very, very difficult. So again, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen and it didn't happen and the gods are not from outer space. I'm just not sure what the absolute truth is, if there is any absolute truth. We can look at the stories of the Grigori, the fallen angels, the lightning bolt that fell to earth when Lucifer fell to earth. All of these myths and stories, we can relate that back to the presence of aliens. The flash of light from the sky as Lucifer fell to earth could have been a spaceship from another planet that had a malfunction, and the gravitational force of Earth, because they were so close, pulled them down, and there was this flash of light as it fell to Earth. I don't really know. It is a bit of a difficult, and as I said, a bit of a difficult and sticky topic, but I don't doubt it. I don't doubt that it did happen, and that people do communicate with aliens as being deities or higher intelligences. It's not just that people communicate with alien beings. It's a whole, there's a whole other arena here where people are communicating and channeling multidimensional beings. So there's a whole area there which is worthy of exploration. But as I said, just be careful. You don't just find that there, you find this in magic. People just make up a whole lot of fantasy stuff around magic. We've seen it through publication of books, especially around the 80s and 90s. There were a lot of people just creating absolute garbage and coming up with these fantastical things that they decided to put in their works and their books. Because it sold more. They got more money out of it, so why not do it, Unfortunately, it then creates, people read it, they don't know any better, and they start to create this whole mythology around it, and unfortunately, it's fantasy. So really just take things with a grain of salt when you read them, and do your research properly, but definitely not doubting it. Definitely not doubting it. Okay, carrying on. She also had a spirit, or maybe it was her, I don't know, following me that same week. I would hear the spirit. It sounded like it was buzzing, a buzzing sound above my head. It was not inside my head, it was outside of my head. I wanted to see if I can outrun it. I was just experimenting to see if it's really outside my head, so I started to run away from this buzzing sound that I felt it was a spirit. And I would successfully run away from it because the buzzing sound would not be as loud anymore. I could hear it in the background fainting away. But when I would stop running, it would always catch back up with me. I asked a tarot card reader to give me another reading. Of course, I never went into detail about what type of reading, but she did say that it was either her or one of her lesser spirits working on my chakras and sharpening my senses to be able to communicate with the spirit world better. Ever since, I have just been studying a lot about the left-hand path. I haven't really been doing actual summoning because I'm afraid of doing something wrong. Maybe living, in a parasite. But eventually I will get back to summoning and working with these entities more. I have been giving offerings, but I haven't been doing any summoning since. Is this something below me, or has anybody experienced anything like this? All right, just to get back to that then. So the buzzing sounds, a few things this could be. So when we work with the gods and goddesses, they would quite often give us familiars. And this is a spirit that comes and works with us to help us, to develop us, to guide us in our magic and our practice. So it could be the buzzing. That could be what the buzzing was. It could also be that your frequency through practice is starting to raise, and therefore you're going to start hearing buzzes, because the vibration itself is buzzing, and you just need to bring yourself into alignment with that vibration. So there's a few things that could be, but it's definitely there, and it wouldn't have been tinnitus. It's called tinnitus, the ringing in your ear, because if you run away from it, it's still in your ear. So it wouldn't have been that. It wouldn't have been a physical thing. If these things do happen, though, I just do want to mention for anybody else, if these things do happen, go to the doctor, get a diagnosis, and rule it out if it can be ruled out. If it is something physical, get medication for it. But going to the doctor and finding out if it is something physical or not is the first step to doing all of this stuff. If it's not a physical thing, you can rule that out, and then you can start looking at the spiritual and the magical aspects of it. But it's always good to, witchcraft and magic is very much an experimental process. So through experimentation, we rule things out to try and find out the end result. So it's probably a good thing to do is just go for a physical checkup and rule out these physical things. But you said you are doing offerings, which is great. You're not summoning, that's fine. There's no reason to do that. But definitely keep up the offerings and do meditation, because as Inanna told you, it's better to raise your vibration so that her vibration doesn't damage yours if it's too low. So keep up the meditation, keep up the practice, keep up the offerings, and raise your vibration, raise your frequency to the same or a similar level so that you can communicate better. Once you come into the correct radio frequency, it becomes easier to communicate. Otherwise, you're down here in AM and they're up there in FM, and the two don't meet properly. Um, la, 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 la. Is there something below me? Has anybody experienced anything like this? Yes, a lot of us have. And it's important to actually find a community where you can actually talk about these things. And I've got my Discord server, the Red Coven. You'll find it in the link tree. There's also the Wildwood Temple Discord server as well, where Kai and I, we do the Into the Wildwood shows on a Friday. That's the Wildwood Temple's connected with that. So they're two great communities, and they're not busy. So, it's not one of those Discord servers that you leave for 10 minutes and you come back and there's 1,000 messages you have to try and get through while you're trying to work and do everything else. So they're not busy, so it's easy to keep up with the messages and content. I would never make anything up because I take this extremely seriously. I never felt anything like this going to church my whole life. I tried to pray and all, but I never felt anything until this happened to me. This is also a very difficult situation. It's because we have these experiences and we talk about UFOs and we talk about speaking with gods and spirits and stuff, and in a lot of areas in our society that is considered to be mental illness, and it's something you need treatment for. And the difficulty here that is, in some cases it could be mental illness. The one litmus test here is if you do get diagnosed with a mental illness and you start taking medication, and there might be an adjustment period, so allow that to happen. But if you were speaking to spirits before the medication and you're still speaking to spirits after the medication, that's a real experience. If that gets taken away, it could be that you were not speaking to the spirits to begin with. Okay, that's kind of the litmus test there. But there are people who do need to be diagnosed. Often they ignore it, which is a shame. But it's difficult. I can't say if anybody is experiencing it or not because I'm not them. I don't know them. And even if I did personally know them, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But it is always coming back to if you have some kind of physical thing, go and get it checked out with your GP. And if it's if you can rule that out, then you can come back to the spiritual. Same here. If you feel like you do need to, just go and have a diagnosis and just find out for yourself. Obviously, when it comes to psychology, it's so different from country to country. In my country, it's a lot different, a lot more accepting and open than it is in the US. So this gets very, very difficult, and therefore I'm going to come back to the same thing that I said before. Find your community that you can speak about these things in, and the Red Coven Discord server or the Wildwood Temple Discord server. The Wildwood Temple Discord server is excellent if you are worried about this type of thing. But ask in there, because you'll probably find that somebody like me who has been practicing for a long enough time, we have been through all these things, and we've done the research, we've had the experiences, and we can say, I resonate with that. You may think you're going crazy, but you're probably not. So find those communities that you can actually speak in regarding these matters. Okay, so that brings me to the end of that message. I did mention that they are a subscriber now and binge watching my videos for the past 2 weeks. Thank you very much, I appreciate that. All right. So, as I said, there was a lot to unpack here, and a lot of useful information that could help other people on their own path with their own experiences. So that's why I wanted to actually go through this and unpack it and pick it apart and discuss it. And thank you to Magister Morpheus for allowing me to do this. it's a very useful and great inclusion. Okay, so thanks for watching. Very lengthy one today. So hope you got through the whole thing, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one. Bye bye.